Greetings, folks. We are back. Dr. Peter James and Dr. Lisa Withrow. Am I saying your name right, Lisa?
You are. You
Okay,
are. Thank
awesome. I
you.
want to make sure I do that. I slaughter everybody's name for that matter. Again, we are here to continue this series, talking about these events that are really unique to higher education, and we want to kind of take the conversation and just switch it up and talk about change in and of itself. We are going through an unprecedented period of change right now, but let's really analyze change holistically from a broad perspective, but also from a minor perspective and an individual perspective, to see how we lead it, to see how we respond to it. And I think this discussion is going to be really interesting, for lack of a better word. Lisa, what are your thoughts to start us off?
Change is not something that a lot of people always welcome. There are personalities who enjoy change, adventure, curiosity, and then there are personalities who are a little uncomfortable with that level of risk and therefore would like to try to create safety. And we sort of try to balance between those two pieces, the level of risk we're willing to take and the safety. But when something like a pandemic hits, we are disrupted and we have no choice about it. So there's a way to manage our change that I think is helpful. There are lots of cycles of change described in educational theory, and I think we're helped by thinking about how change progresses. So if you don't mind, I'll go through a little bit of that and then back over to you. How's that sound?
That sounds like a plan. I'm really interested to hear that, especially from a perspective of how we as individuals respond to change. That a lot of the folks who are watching may know this or see this about themselves, but also be seeing this from other people around them. They're the colleagues around them as well. So yeah, definitely, I'm interested.
Oftentimes, if we're not in a major disruption that has been foisted upon us, we find that we're not satisfied. There's a sensation that we need to change, but we don't know exactly what it is. And the sensation is felt in the body. It's not necessarily a cognitive thought. There's just an uneasiness that things aren't working anymore. Our equilibrium is getting a little bit shaky. And so an awareness rises. With a disruption that comes from the outside world, we are immediately shoved into awareness. We have change. And so we have to think about how this change affects our bodies and our minds and our relationships and our vocation,
Yeah.
as well as whole communities around us, our economics, our neighbors, the restaurants we can't go to anymore, the schools we can't walk into anymore. After a while, the awareness piece, which is where a lot of coaches do a great deal of our work, asking powerful questions, there's a sense of hopefully mobilization. Okay, how are we going to engage this change? What kind of action do we want to take? What kind of energy are we going to put into riding this wave or managing somehow this wave? When we get mobilized and get enough energy going, we actually take an action. We begin to think about online courses. We begin to figure out how we're going to do this thing, how we're going to be educators on the screen for whole groups of people and how we're going to interact with them. We get the plan, we take the action, and then we begin to assimilate. We test, we reflect. Did that work? Did it not work? What needs to change again? How can we come back around and think through what was effective for at least most people involved? And once we get into the assimilation of the change, we get a new normal. We begin to think through what life is now and reflect on that too. Is this going to be long-term or short-term? So that's a really brief and quick move through a cycle of change. And we cycle back around all the time and have various layers of change going on at the same time.
So Lisa, what I love about what you just described there is the word cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I know oftentimes in change theory often has been designed for organizations, not necessarily for the individual, but more for organizations in the broad sense. What are the periods of change, or what are the strategies around change? And one of the most popular theories of change, the models of change, is Lewin's theory of change,
Mm-hmm.
which describes an industry or an organization as unfreezing,
Right.
then which is the first phase,
Yeah.
then the change and transition, which is the actual change itself, and then the refreezing, as if we're going back to normal, or once this change takes place, we're just moving forward in light of this change. I like to think, instead of that linear approach, that changes, as you said, it's more cyclical. It's more of a change is going to happen on a regular basis. So now, if my mind works like that, instead of waiting for change to happen to me, I want to instead of think of, how can I manage change? How can I create change, perhaps? And then how can I create change even for those around me, not in a stressful way by any means, but almost looking at it from an evolutionary perspective. Think about it from this perspective also. Technology continues to change around us, and we're having to adapt.
Mhm.
Travel as we know it has changed over the years. So many different industries, so many different people have impacted change on us. Is it so wrong that we do the same for ourselves and even for our sphere of influence? And that's where the cyclic analysis of change comes from, where once you change and you're going through the change process and you're completing it, it's time to do it again, or to identify ways that you can continue to change in an effort to for a better evolutionary experience, one, but and also in an effort to progress the institution, to impact students' lives better, to really allow your model, your institutional model, to really be impacted on a small as well as a broader scale. Hopefully that made some type of sense there, Lisa.
Well, I think you're right that change is complicated and there are cycles within cycles as
Yeah.
well. For
Yes.
example, I think about, on an individual level, someone who is trying to put courses online
Mhm.
and be true to vocation and the course, the pedagogy, and is also dealing with staying at home with children, which you may be
Mhm.
dealing with yourself, and is also trying to figure out how to connect with parents, and may have a flood in the basement, and
Mhm.
all these things are happening at the same time, and these are all changes. Some are bigger than others,
Right.
so there's not just one change that's happening. It's very complex, and our resilience in the midst of it
Mhm.
is helped by understanding a cycle, understanding that we're actually going to move through this. And so sometimes people get stuck. They get frozen, not Lewin frozen, but they get frozen because it's too much. There's a sense of being overwhelmed. And so this is where a coach can come in and be present for someone who is feeling overwhelmed, and kind of breaking it down into tasks that are manageable. Same with an institution. An institution can begin to feel very overwhelmed by all the challenges all at once. And so a coach can help with a team or a leader. How do we break this down into something that's manageable toward the ultimate goal of success and resilience?
And I love that, Lisa. I love the fact that, yes, this cyclical approach is probably a good thing. And it's important to think of what's the next change individually or collectively. But then I don't need to do this alone, because for a couple of reasons. Number one, I need to be able to take a step back.
Right.
All of us do to a certain extent. Take a step back in order to be resilient. But then I love the don't go at it alone, because you don't want to, the overwhelm is unnecessary. Overwhelm happens to all of us. But once you're able to take that step back to ask, what do I need? What are the resources around me that I need? What are the resources that others around me need? If coaching, if powerful coaching, if authentic coaching is available to you, please consider taking it, because the partnership, the powerful questions, the active listening, the reflection, the challenging, the accountability could be something that may not be seen on a regular basis, but may allow for better resilience and reduction of overwhelm. And I think that really can benefit the entire institution overall.
We are, as we discussed in our last conversation, in liminal space, the in-between space. And when people are in transition or disruption, as we are now, it is, as you say, really important not to go it alone.
Yeah.
And not to really entirely rely on just personal relationships to get us through, because everybody else is also in the same situation, what you called right now the eye of the storm, but we're going to go back into those heavy winds very soon. And so somebody outside of your own system is always helpful, and that's where I believe in coaching, and that's why I am a coach, because I've experienced that from coaching myself.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. That's definitely a good point right there. We have both, while we are both coaches, we have both had coaches ourselves that have made a difference in our lives, that allowed us to make a difference in our lives. And
Right.
I don't think I can speak for myself, definitely, Lisa. I wouldn't be here today if coaching didn't have that type of impact on me, or that I've seen on others wholeheartedly. So if you are listening, if you never experienced authentic coaching, definitely reach out to Kinetic Insights for sure. Lisa, thank you so much for a great conversation. Any parting notes for
Thank
us on
you.
change?
Well, I just wish you peace in the eye of the storm, and also a sense of staying as grounded as possible. We're all trying to do that. Let's try to do that together.
Good stuff. Good stuff. In the meantime, folks, please be safe. Continue to be safe. And we look forward to seeing you at the next conversation.